Cool. All right, let's do this then. Hey everybody, how's everybody doing? Hopefully, I want to start this video off by saying Happy Easter to all the ones that do celebrate this holiday. Happy Easter to everybody out there, and hopefully you guys had fun. Try to make the most out of it. I saw a couple videos of trying their best to cooperate with it, but Happy Easter to everybody out there. Again, I always start this video by saying I want to give a shout out to all the ones that are and working essential jobs right now. Hospitals, construction workers, everybody. We're thinking of you. We're praying for you, and that you guys are safe, and you know, you guys are making this thing run while some of us have to kind of sit back and try our best to just follow the rules and everything. But for the essentials out there, hopefully you guys are safe. As always, wash your hands before every meal and after every meal, as well as if you're gonna cough on your elbow. Try to practice social distancing, and always carry some hand sanitizer with you. And now wear a mask. Anything, the better you protect yourself, the better it is for you and your family. And the ones that are quarantined right now, hopefully you guys are taking this time to self-care and rest the body, rest the mind, and enjoying time with your loved ones, and just trying to make the best out of it. And as always, the quicker we all come forward with this and come attack this together, the quicker this whole pandemic goes. And hopefully it goes by quicker rather than later, because I'm pretty sure we're all to the point where we all want to start over, go back to normal lives. And the quicker we all work together, the quicker this goes through. So let's all just try to do our part, be safe, be smart. So again, happy Easter to everybody out there. So today the Minnesota Vikings are on the clock. They finished the season 10-6 and were a wild card team. But before I get into that, we want to recap on the draft class that they had. Now, I know yesterday I mentioned that the Saints drafted Eric McCoy, the center from Texas A&M. Well, the Vikings did something similar. In their first round, they drafted a center out of North Carolina State, Garrett Bradbury, who had the best field day on the combine a center could have, and that's why he was the first center chosen. He was just that fluid and that good, and it gave him enough for Minnesota to take him on, the first round. And he had a successful year, I believe. Yeah, it was started slow in the beginning, but he recuperated. He kind of, reevaluated everything, and he just had a good year. He's going to be the starting center for the Vikings for a long time, and that was a great pick by Minnesota. So move on to the second round. They drafted the tight end out of Alabama, Irv Smith. He was the backup to Kyle Rudolph, but tight ends are kind of a hard position to transition into the NFL. But he still had a solid year as a backup: 36 receptions, 311 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And he's a really solid run blocker. So that also helps too. I think the more involved he gets in the program with the Vikings, I think the more you'll see his role expand. And we can't wait to see the jump he sees from year 1 to year 2. So the third round, they drafted a running back out of Boise State, Alexander Madison. He was the backup to Dalvin Cook, so it was very rare that he did see the field. But when he did see the field, he made the most out of it. 462 yards and 1 touchdown rushing. He's a good backup to Dalvin Cook. It's just another, he's a power back. And, once Dalvin Cook gets done, doing this damage to the defense, here comes this big bulldozer. And, it's just that running game from Minnesota is deadly. And it was one of the best in the NFL. So, good luck stuffing that 1-2 combo. So that was a good pickup by Minnesota. And the fourth round, they drafted Drew Samaya, backup guard. He's from Oklahoma, but he was just a backup. So, we'll see what happens with him. And hopefully he has an expanded role too. They didn't have a fifth rounder, but they went to the sixth rounder. And this pick, I do want to dedicate it to my brother, who actually showed me a little bit of film on him in last draft class, who we thought the Raiders were going to pick up. But Cameron Smith, a linebacker out of USC, there was nothing flashy about him coming out of college. He was just your normal, prototypical thumper linebacker, just hits. But he's a good depth player. He's a special teams guy, and he ended up the season with 8 tackles. But his impact on the team was special teams, and my brother knew what he's talking about. So that was good scouting by my brother on his end. Cameron Smith, the linebacker out of USC. Um, then they had another 6th rounder, Armand Watts, the defensive tackle out of Arkansas. He was a rotational man, 13 tackles, 1.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. He was a rotational guy, but they kind of need him. They're probably going to give him a little bit more of a better role now that Linval Joseph is gone. And, we'll see what his role is next year. Then their last 6th round pick, Olisameka Uda, the tight end from Elon. Again, just a rotational man, was used sometimes as an extra lineman, eligible man, but we'll see what his deal is for next year. Then they had 4 7th round picks, and with their first 7th round pick, they took a corner out of Texas, Chris Boyd. His draft status last year was kind of interesting. They had him as when he decided to enter the draft, they had him as a low second, high third. Then he had a sort of a bad senior pro day, a senior bowl game, so that kind of made him drop a little bit. Then the combine didn't do him any favors, and his pro day, it was good, but I think it's just teams really kind of kept dropping him lower and lower, and he ended up being taken in the 7th round. 22 tackles, 1 pass deflections. We'll see what happens with him. Right now, Xavier Rhodes got cut, and Mike Hughes is he's a good corner, but health is a question at this point of his career. So I mean, he might get a nod to start next year, and we'll see what happens. And if he comes out and flashes out and turns out to be a good corner, they got a starter in the 7th round, and that's all you can really ask for when you draft guys in the 7th, is what kind of impact they make on the team. So we'll see. Their second 7th round picks, Dylan Mitchell, wide receiver out of Oregon, healthy scratch, didn't play 1 game, so nothing other than we'll see what his position is next year. And then we move on to Olabisi Johnson, wide receiver out of Colorado State. He actually did catch some, fire at the end of the, season. He was actually starting to look like, like, oh man, they might have gotten a steal, but then, things kind of happened. But, there was promise there. And, he ended up with 31 receptions, 294 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So they only put him as BC Johnson. His full name is Olabisi Johnson, but I guess you can't fit that on the screen. But wide receiver out of Colorado State, and we'll see what happens now that Stephon Diggs is out. Maybe he'll move up. Maybe he'll stay in the slot. But other than that, I mean, the kid shows some promise. So nothing more to it than that. And then with their last 7th round pick, Austin Cutting, the long snapper out of Air Force. So now they have a whole unit on special teams. He's a really good long snapper. Didn't mishap a snap, I think, last year, and he proved his worth. So that's always good to have. Those are one of the positions that nobody really likes to talk about, because nobody really thinks as a long snapper as an important position. But if that guy goes down, you better have a good backup long snapper, because then it's going to be a long time. It's going to be a long day with a bad long snapper. I've seen it plenty of times. So other than that, the Vikings always seem they're one of those teams that has way too many draft picks than the other. It always seems now for like the last 2-3 years, they've had multiple 1st-round picks, or they've had like multiple later round picks. But the Vikings are always one of those teams that, has multiple picks. How they do it, I don't know, but it's a success because it seems like, they're winning. So they're always doing that. So as I mentioned, they were 10-6. The first 4 weeks were kind of crucial. there was reports of, Adam Thielen and, Stephon Diggs kind of taking a jab at Kirk Cousins because I don't know if it was just a receiver thing or if it was just the whole unit itself. They were just saying, they were getting looked at a lot. They just, I don't know what it was. They just weren't getting their calls. They weren't getting their numbers called. And I don't know if that was due to the game plan or something else. But I mean, when you have Dalvin Cook there, you would think like, hey, let's just try to run the ball and then we'll throw later. But I mean, I got to give it to those guys that they want the ball in their hand, which is no big deal. But I don't know what happened there. And then once that whole thing cleared up, they were on a roll. They finished the year 10-6. They were a wild card team, the last seed in the NFC. They beat the Saints in that overtime game, the thriller overtime in New Orleans. Kyle Rudolph caught the touchdown, but they weren't. It was kind of questionable whether he did a push off or he, it was both ways. We don't know. But as I said yesterday, the refs reviewed it, they confirmed it, and they didn't even look at it. They just said, "All right, touchdown, let's get out of here." And they went on to beat up the Saints, and then the following week they have to go to San Francisco, and it was just a blowout by San Francisco. And I mean, they lose to the team that represented the NFC in the Super Bowl, so there was no shame in that. So that's where their season ended in the divisional round, and they had a good year. They had a good year. The first 4 weeks, you wouldn't think that they would have, even made it to the playoffs, but then they regrouped. They made their changes, what they needed to do, and that was it. I mean, Kirk Cousins showed his value. Now they're getting pieces better and better. So season's over. They head into free agency. One of the first signings they did was Michael Pierce, the defensive tackle from the Ravens. He's going to replace Laval Joseph, longtime Vikings. So now he's out. In comes Michael Pierce. They re-signed Dan Bailey, the kicker, who still has still has juice in his legs, so he could still kick out there. Anthony Harris, the safety, got tagged, so he's on a 1-year contract again. It's more of a prove-it deal for Anthony Harris. I'm sure they would love to get him long term. It's just, they got to find the right price. So for now, it's just tag and just prove your worth again, I guess. They re-signed C.J. Ham, the fullback. He's a good fullback. I mean, not a lot of teams use fullbacks in the league, but when they do, he's one of the better ones in this league. So it's a good, they re-signed him to another year, who's going to help out Dalvin Cook, an extra lineman, you could say, for him to open holes and Dalvin Cook to do his thing. They re-signed Britton Colquitt, the punter, so everybody's back together, the kicker, the long snapper, and the punter, so that's a good thing. They re-signed Eric Wilson, the linebacker. Sean Mannion, the quarterback, he resigned. They did sign Tajay Sharp out of the Titans, so he's going to be joining the wide receiver group, which is kind of a big thing to fill now that Stephon Diggs is gone and he got shipped to Buffalo. But in my last video, after talking to Will from the Buffalo Bills, I did make that pick for Minnesota, their first round pick, and I did have them taking Justin Jefferson, so that could be a fill. But Tajay Sharp comes in and he'll help the wide receiver room, a good vet that can actually help out the wide receiver room. He's a good wide receiver, so that's a good signing. DeMarcus Gates, linebacker out of the XFL Houston Roughnecks, who again XFL just did close shutdown operation, so that's kind of a sad thing. We were all rooting for the XFL this time. It's just circumstances happen, and that's just how it rolls sometimes. But he is coming from the XFL, another signee from the XFL. Now he's with the Vikings. Rashad Hill, the offensive tackle, he resigned. Anthony Sattel, the defensive end, he's coming from the 49ers to the Vikings. They've re-signed Brett Jones, the center. And what else we got? Amir Abdullah, the running back, he's back. So the running back room now has Dalvin Cook, Amir Abdullah, and Madison, or hope I didn't butcher his name. Yes, Madison. So that's a good running back room. So all pretty good. And then Dakota Dozier, the guard, he resigned. So Minnesota really just wanted to stay in-house, which is, it's actually good because they're still relatively young, and the way they had a good year. It's just they met San Francisco, and it was just bad place, bad time. San Francisco was just on fire this year, so unfortunately for them, that's just how their season ended. But this team has a lot of hope heading into next year, and with all these re-signings and a couple of free agents coming in, they can only get from here. So I mean, we'll see what happens. Hopefully, Kirk Cousins opens up his passing game a little bit more, and take the pressure off Dalvin Cook. But we'll see what happens. As I mentioned earlier, they traded Stephon Diggs to Buffalo, so now that opens up competition for who wants to be the number two. Because now, without a doubt, Adam Thielen is the number one wide receiver. So now they have to fill out that number two. I did have them drafting Justin Jefferson, who could probably come in and compete for that number two. But we'll see with Tajee Sharp and PC Johnson coming back. I mean, they can always add another wide receiver. So I mean, hopefully, we'll see what they do. And then they cut Xavier Rhodes. He just had a down year. This was probably his worst year since his rookie year, but they cut him. They decided, enough was enough, and he ended up going to the Colts. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully, he has better luck there. But as I mentioned earlier, I think they would have not cut Xavier Rhodes if they weren't totally sold on Chris Boyd and Mike Hughes, a former first rounder. So they have to feel pretty comfortable that those two are going to go. But again, it's all about competition, and maybe they're comfortable maybe bringing in a rookie to take over. We don't know, but the staff has to feel pretty comfortable with that room. I mean, they can always improve, but for them to let go one of their better defensive players, it's just that was kind of an eye opener for everybody, even after the down year. So it was just one of those things that nobody saw coming. So it happens. It happens. But as I mentioned earlier, they finished 10-6. Everything's looking good for them. Because Green Bay's just getting a little bit older. Chicago, they're kind of cap struck, and they're kind of in a position where if their offense doesn't really do well, then they're stuck in the middle. They have a great defense but a terrible offense. So, and with Detroit, it seems like no matter what they do, it never pans out. It seems like Detroit can always get the best free agents. It just somehow they just never seem to pull it together. So I mean, right now Minnesota has a lot of hope in a division full of questions. So I mean, we'll see what happens, but that division should be exciting for next year. So without any further ado, it is now time for my prediction on who I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to take with the 25th pick in the NFL draft. All right, man. Ooh, draft day is almost here. That sound's going to get closer and closer, and we cannot wait. So here we go, guys, with the 25th pick in the 2020 NFL Draft. The Minnesota Vikings select Jeff Gladney, cornerback out of TCU. Like I mentioned earlier, they let go of Xavier Rhodes, and now they're going to put their faith in Chris Boyd and Mike Hughes. But Chris Boyd kind of does have question marks, and Mike Hughes, as talented as he is, his only question mark is availability because he has missed time both of his years in the league. So with Jeff Gladney, I mean, he's as tough as they come. He actually was part of TCU in 2015, but because of a ACL injury, they redshirted him his freshman year. So not a lot of people usually come back stronger after an ACL injury, but he did. 2016, he came back. He was the starter, 46 tackles, 6 pass deflections. And then 2017, 28 tackles, 2 interceptions, 5 pass deflections. And then 2018, 41 tackles, 2 interceptions, 1 sack, 13 pass deflections. And then 2019, 31 tackles, 1 sack, 1 interception, 14 pass deflections. So all these pass deflections should tell you he's a man corner. He's going to follow you. And, the intangibles on him, he's 5'10", 191 pounds, a 32 arm length, a 9-inch hand size. He ran a 4.4840, 17 reps on the bench, 37.5-inch vertical, 10.5-inch broad jump, and a 7.263 cone drill. So he participated in Senior Bowl, and he had scouts raving about him. Everybody loved the way he played. It's the only thing is in today's NFL, corners, you kind of want them to be taller because receivers are getting taller and faster as well. It's just at 5'10", he's as physical as they come. He's gritty. He's a man corner. He's going to follow you everywhere. His eye discipline is one of the best out there, if not better, if not the best in the cornerback draft class. The only weaknesses in his game is sometimes he does get a little bit aggressive, so that does kind of make him lose focus sometimes, and he'll get a little grabby on, pass interference calls. But I mean, the man can cover. I mean, 6 pass deflections 1 year, 5 the next, 13 the next, and 14, his senior year. So I mean, the man can cover. It's just he wishes, those deflections can turn into interceptions. But overall, he's a really good corner. He's not the tallest man, in the room, but he plays like he has, he plays with a big heart, and he makes up for that. So I like the kid. I think he's gonna be one of those day one surprises. I think not a lot of people do know about him, but anybody that does watch, film and everything, people will tell you, Jeff Gladney, he's just as good as they come. He's one of the better corners out there in this draft, and I think he's a perfect fit for Minnesota with all that defense that they have on the defensive line and the linebackers. He'll fit right in, and he doesn't have to start right away. He could play, slot. He could play, he can also be a kick returner. He's just that athletic. But I think he's going to be one of the better pros when this is all said and done. And I think he's a perfect fit for Minnesota. So I have Jeff Gladney, cornerback out of TCU, going to Minnesota. So that'll wrap it up for today's video, guys. I appreciate it. Tomorrow, the topic is going to be about the Houston Texans, but the pick is going to be Miami. This is their last first-round pick. They did a lot of trades, and this was one of them. Houston traded Jeremy Tunsil, I believe. I think this was the pick. Yep, this was the pick that they used to trade for Jeremy Tunsil, and now this is Miami's third first-round pick. I'll put a review tomorrow on what Miami did in the first 2 picks before I make my initial pick, and the topic tomorrow is Houston. And just a reminder, next Sunday will be the last video for individual teams. The following Monday, I'm going to do a recap of 1 through 32, and I'm going to do my final mock on choosing the final players. And I believe Wednesday, I'm going to have to still work things out with my brother. We're going to go on YouTube Live to do a Raider one, just the Raiders. I don't know if it was Wednesday or Thursday. It was one of those 2 days, but we're going to just do strictly a Raider one for Raider Nation out there. And then Thursday, we usually do a big party, but because of this quarantine, it's just going to be me and him and his family, and, my girlfriend just there. We're just going to be at his garage. But what we'll do is we'll throw a live watch party on YouTube Live and on the Facebook channel. That way, everybody can join, from the guest I've had to, Will, to Roy, to my brother who did the Raiders one. He'll be there. He'll probably be sitting next to me as we do a live reaction to the draft, and we'll go from there. So the draft is about a week away. It's just next week is pick 32, but this is the last week of videos, so we're getting down to it, guys. So we're all getting excited for it. I know I am. I'm getting excited that the draft here is coming up, and hopefully you guys are too. Like I said, next Sunday, last video, and then Monday will be the final mock draft, and Wednesday, Thursday, we'll do a live one with my brother. So I'll have more as the days come on. So you all have a wonderful night, and we will see you tomorrow for the Houston Texans.